Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked through the government surplus auction yard in Phoenix. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete lot filled with old military equipment, broken vehicles, and random junk that nobody wanted anymore. Jake had exactly $500 in his pocket, which was all the money he had left after paying rent on his small auto repair shop. Business had been terrible for months, and he desperately needed some cheap tools or equipment he could use or sell. The auctioneer's voice echoed across the lot as Jake wandered between rows of surplus items. Most of the stuff looked like garbage to him. Rusty generators, old computers that probably didn't work, and furniture that had seen better days. He was about to leave when he heard the auctioneer announce lot number 347. Next up, we have a decommissioned experimental aircraft, the auctioneer called out. This item was seized from an undisclosed facility and has been sitting in storage for 3 years. We don't have much information about it, but it appears to be some kind of prototype. Bidding starts at $100. Jake pushed through the small crowd to get a better look. What he saw made his jaw drop. The object under the large tarp didn't look like any aircraft he had ever seen. It was sleek and curved, with a metallic surface that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Even covered up, it looked expensive and advanced. Several men in expensive suits were already bidding on it. Jake recognized them as representatives from big defense contractors who usually bought the valuable military surplus. They were throwing around numbers like it was pocket change. The bidding quickly jumped to $5,000, then $10,000, then $20,000. Jake knew he should walk away. He only had $500, and these corporate buyers had deep pockets. But something about the strange aircraft called to him. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was just stubbornness. But he decided to stay and watch. The bidding slowed down when it reached $40,000. Only 2 corporate buyers were left, going back and forth in $1,000 increments. Jake noticed that they seemed unsure about what they were actually buying. They kept whispering to each other and checking their phones, probably trying to get approval from their bosses. At $50,000, one of the corporate buyers dropped out. The remaining bidder looked confident as he prepared to win the auction. The auctioneer was about to close the bidding when his microphone suddenly cut out. While he fumbled with the equipment, trying to get it working again, the corporate buyer got a phone call that made his face turn pale. He listened for a moment, then shook his head and walked away. When the microphone came back on, the auctioneer looked confused. "Do I hear any other bids for lot 347? Without really thinking about it, Jake raised his hand. $500, he called out. The auctioneer looked around the lot. "I have $500. Do I hear 600? He waited, but nobody else bid. The corporate buyers had all left, and the few remaining people at the auction weren't interested in the mysterious aircraft. Going once, going twice. Sold to the gentleman in the red cap for $500. Jake couldn't believe what he had just done. He had spent his last $500 on something he knew nothing about. His friend Pete Sullivan, who had driven him to the auction, looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Jake, what the hell did you just buy?" Pete asked as they walked toward the payment booth. "I honestly don't know," Jake replied, still in shock, "but it looks valuable. Maybe we can sell it for parts." After paying and filling out paperwork, Jake was given an address for a storage facility on the outskirts of Phoenix. The government clerk told him he had 48 hours to remove his purchase or face additional storage fees. Jake and Pete drove to the facility in Pete's old pickup truck, expecting to find some kind of experimental jet that they could strip for valuable components. The storage unit was huge, big enough to hold a small airplane. When the facility manager opened the door, Jake and Pete stood there speechless. The aircraft was even more impressive without the tarp covering it. It looked like something from a science fiction movie, with smooth curves and a crystalline surface that seemed to glow with its own inner light. "You boys sure you can handle this thing?" the facility manager asked. It's been humming like that since they brought it here 3 years ago. Never seen anything like it. Jake walked closer to the strange aircraft. There were no visible windows or doors, just the smooth, continuous surface. But as he approached, a section of the hull suddenly became transparent, revealing an interior that looked nothing like any cockpit he had ever seen. Without really thinking about it, he reached out and touched what looked like a control panel. The moment his fingers made contact with the surface, the entire aircraft came alive. Lights flickered on throughout the interior, and a low humming sound filled the storage unit. Pete jumped back in alarm, but Jake felt drawn to step inside. The interior was spacious and filled with equipment that looked incredibly advanced. Curved surfaces covered with glowing symbols surrounded what appeared to be a pilot's seat. As Jake moved deeper into the craft, more lights activated, and the humming grew louder. Suddenly, a column of light appeared in the center of the main cabin. The light swirled and took shape, forming the image of a woman unlike any Jake had ever seen. She was tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and silver hair that seemed to move on its own. Her eyes were large and bright green, and when she spoke, her voice had a musical quality that made Jake's heart skip a beat. "Greetings, my bonded mate," she said in perfect English. "I am Zareth of the Kepler Coalition. You have awakened me from stasis by claiming my family's vessel. According to the ancient laws of my people, you are now my husband." Jake stared at the glowing blue woman floating in front of him, wondering if he was having some kind of breakdown. Pete had backed all the way out of the spacecraft and was calling his name from the storage unit entrance. But Jake couldn't move. The woman who called herself Zaroth looked completely real, even though she was obviously some kind of hologram. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a mistake," Jake finally managed to say. "I just bought this thing at an auction. I didn't know anyone was inside it." Zareth tilted her head, studying him with those bright green eyes. "There is no mistake, Jake Martinez. When you touched the command interface, you bonded with the ship's consciousness. The Stellar Dawn has accepted you as her captain, which makes you my mate according to Kepler law." "How do you know my name?" Jake asked, feeling more confused by the second. "The ship scanned your biological signature and accessed your planet's information networks," Zareth explained. "I know that you are 32 years old, that you repair mechanical devices for a living, and that you are considered unmarried by human standards. This makes you eligible for the bonding ceremony." Jake held up his hands. "Look, lady, I don't know what kind of bonding ceremony you're talking about, but I'm not married to anyone. I just wanted to buy some tools." Zareth's expression softened slightly. "I understand this is confusing for you. Perhaps I should explain the situation more clearly." She gestured around the interior of the ship. "This vessel belonged to my father, who was the ruler of the Kepler Coalition. 3 of your years ago, there was a diplomatic incident between our species. Your military forces captured this ship during the conflict, and I have been in stasis waiting for someone worthy to claim it." Pete finally worked up the courage to step back inside the ship. "Jake, who are you talking to? All I see is some kind of light show." Jake looked back and forth between Pete and Zareth. "You can't see her. The holographic interface only activates for the bonded captain," Zareth said. "Your friend cannot perceive me unless I choose to make myself visible to him as well." She made a gesture, and suddenly Pete jumped backward as Zareth appeared before him too. "Holy hell," Pete whispered. "Jake, what did you get us into?" Over the next several hours, Zareth patiently explained the situation to both men. Her people, the Keplers, were an advanced civilization from a star system 40 light-years away. They had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years and had recently made contact with Earth. The diplomatic incident she mentioned had occurred when human military forces attacked the Kepler science vessel, thinking it was an invasion force. "Your leaders took several of our ships as trophies," Zareth explained. "Most were too damaged to function, but the Stellar Dawn remained intact. I stayed with the ship to ensure it would not fall into the wrong hands. Jake was having trouble processing all of this information. So you're telling me that I accidentally married an alien princess by touching a button? That is a simplified but accurate description, Zareth replied. And now we have a problem. My father is dead, killed by my brother Vextar, who has seized control of our government. As his daughter and the rightful heir, I must return to challenge his rule. But according to our laws, I cannot do this alone. My bonded mate must accompany me as my champion. Jake felt like the ground was spinning beneath his feet. Champion? I fix cars for a living. I don't know anything about space, politics, or alien wars. That does not matter, Zareth said. What matters is that you have proven yourself worthy by claiming the ship. The Stellar Dawn would not have accepted you otherwise. Pete was examining the ship's interior with wide eyes. Jake, look at this stuff. This technology is incredible. Do you have any idea what this could be worth? Over the following days, Jake tried to keep the discovery secret while figuring out what to do. He had Pete help him move the ship from the storage facility to an abandoned aircraft hangar outside of Phoenix that Pete knew about. Zareth H. proved to be incredibly helpful, teaching Jake how to operate the ship's basic systems and explaining Kepler technology. The ship was amazing, beyond anything Jake had imagined. It could fly faster than light, had weapons that could destroy entire cities, and could repair itself if damaged. Zareth H. demonstrated these capabilities during their first test flight, taking Jake and Pete on a quick trip around the solar system that lasted only a few hours but covered billions of miles. Jake also learned more about Zareth herself. Despite being from an alien civilization, she was curious about human culture and eager to learn about Earth. She found human movies fascinating, especially romantic comedies, which she said were very different from Kepler entertainment. In return, she taught Jake about her people's history and customs. Your species is remarkably similar to ours, she told him one evening as they sat in the ship's main cabin. We both value family, honor, and freedom. I think humans and Keplers could be great allies. Jake was starting to develop feelings for Zareth, which confused him even more. She was beautiful, intelligent, and kind, but she was also an alien from another star system who expected him to help her fight a war. The whole situation seemed impossible. Their secret didn't last long. Earth's military satellites detected the ship during one of their test flights, and within days, soldiers surrounded the hangar. Commander Lisa Brooks, a stern woman in an Air Force uniform, arrived with a team of specialists and demanded that Jake surrender the alien vessel. This spacecraft represents stolen alien technology, Commander Brooks announced. It needs to be turned over to the proper authorities for study. Zareth H. appeared before the entire military team, causing several soldiers to reach for their weapons. I am Princess Zareth of the Kepler Coalition, she said in a voice that commanded respect. This vessel belongs to my family, and Jake Martinez is my legally bonded husband under both human and Kepler law. You have no authority over either of us. Commander Brooks looked skeptical. Ma'am, with all due respect, I don't think human marriage laws apply to alien princesses. Actually, they do, Zareth replied calmly. When your planet signed the Kepler Accords 3 years ago, you agreed to recognize our legal customs. The bonding ceremony creates a marriage that is valid under both sets of laws. Jake stepped forward, still not entirely believing what he was saying. She's right. We're married, and this is our ship. You can't just take it. Commander Brooks spoke quietly into a radio for several minutes, obviously getting instructions from her superiors. When she finished, her expression was troubled. It appears that Princess Zareth H. is correct about the legal situation. However, we need to discuss the implications of this marriage for Earth's security. That was when Zareth received the transmission. That changed everything. A message from the Kepler system informed her that Vextar had consolidated his power and was preparing to launch attacks against human colonies. He demanded that Zareth surrender herself immediately, or he would consider Earth an enemy of the Kepler coalition. The Pentagon conference room felt cramped, even though it was large enough to seat 50 people. Jake sat uncomfortably in his best shirt and jeans, surrounded by generals, admirals, and government officials in expensive suits. He had never imagined he would be in a place like this, discussing matters of interstellar war and diplomacy. Zareth stood beside him, her holographic form visible to everyone in the room thanks to a special projector they had installed. Admiral Frank Carter, a gray-haired man with stern eyes, leaned forward across the massive table. "Let me make sure I understand this situation correctly. Mr. Martinez, you accidentally married an alien princess, and now her psychotic brother is threatening to attack human colonies unless we hand her over." Jake nodded. "That's about right, sir. And you expect us to start a war with an advanced alien civilization to protect one person?" "She's not just one person," Jake replied, surprising himself with his firmness. "She's my wife, and she's the rightful leader of her people. Vexstar is a tyrant who murdered his own father. If we give in to his demands now, what's to stop him from making more demands later?" Admiral Carter looked skeptical. "Mr. Martinez, you're a car mechanic from Phoenix. What makes you think you understand interstellar politics?" Jake felt his temper rising. "Maybe I don't understand politics, but I understand bullies. And that's all Vexstar is, a bully with fancy weapons. You don't stop bullies by giving them what they want." Zareth placed a gentle hand on Jake's shoulder, even though her touch had no physical substance. "My husband speaks wisely, Admiral Carter. Vexstar has already proven that he cannot be trusted. 3 years ago, he ordered the attack on your science vessels that started this conflict. He blamed it on my father, but I have evidence that he was responsible." Hanel Patricia Alice, the head of Earth Defense Forces, studied the holographic princess carefully. "Princess Zaroth, what kind of military capabilities does your brother possess?" "The Kepler Coalition has approximately 200 warships, each capable of destroying your largest cities with a single weapon discharge," Zareth replied matter-of-factly. "However, not all of those ships support Vexstar. Many fleet commanders remain loyal to my father's memory and would join us if given the opportunity." The room fell silent as the officials absorbed this information. Jake could see the fear in their eyes as they realized how outmatched Earth's defenses were against Kepler technology. Finally, Admiral Carter spoke again. "What exactly are you proposing, Princess?" "I propose an alliance," Zareth said. "Earth provides military support for my claim to the throne, and in return, the Kepler Coalition shares technology and establishes formal trade relations. Both of our peoples would benefit from such an arrangement." Over the following weeks, Jake found himself at the center of complex negotiations between Earth and the Kepler Coalition. Representatives from Zareth's loyal supporters arrived secretly on Earth to discuss terms of alliance. Jake was amazed to discover that he was actually good at these discussions. His straightforward, honest approach seemed to work well with both humans and Keplers. "The thing is," Jake explained to a group of Kepler military commanders during one meeting, "humans don't like being told what to do by anybody. If Vexstar thinks he can threaten us into submission, he's got another thing coming. We might not have your fancy weapons, but we're stubborn as hell." The Kepler officers found this amusing. Their leader, a tall woman named Commander Thalen, smiled broadly. "Your mate has chosen well, Princess. Humans have a reputation for being resourceful when threatened." Jake was also learning more about Kepler culture from Zareth. She explained that her people had been ruled by hereditary monarchs for thousands of years, but that system was becoming outdated. Many younger Keplers wanted more say in their government, which was one reason why Vexstar's authoritarian rule was unpopular. "Your human concept of democracy is fascinating," Zareth told Jake during one of their private conversations. The idea that people can choose their own leaders, rather than having them imposed by birth or conquest, is revolutionary to many of my people. It's not perfect, Jake admitted. Sometimes we choose badly, but at least we get to make the choice. Their relationship was also deepening beyond the political marriage they had started with. Jake found himself genuinely caring for Zeroth, admiring her intelligence, courage, and compassion. She seemed to feel the same way about him, often commenting on his integrity and determination. The peaceful negotiations were shattered when Vexstar made good on his threats. 3 human colonies in the outer solar system came under attack by Kepler warships. The space stations were destroyed in minutes, with thousands of casualties. Jake watched the news reports with growing horror, knowing that his decision to protect Zareth had led to those deaths. "This is my fault," he said to Zareth H. as they watched footage of the destroyed colonies. "Those people died because I wouldn't hand you over." "No," Zareth replied firmly. "Those people died because my brother is a monster who values power more than life. If you had surrendered me to him, he would have found other excuses to attack your people. Tyrants always do." Vexstar's broadcast to Earth made his intentions clear. The holographic image of Jake's brother-in-law appeared on every television screen and computer monitor on the planet. He was tall and imposing, with the same blue skin as Zareth, but cold, cruel eyes. "People of Earth," Vexstar announced, "your leaders have chosen to harbor a traitor to the Kepler coalition. My sister has poisoned your minds with her weakness and sentiment. Surrender her to me immediately, or watch your colonies burn one by one." Jake felt sick as he watched the broadcast. The weight of responsibility for humanity's safety was crushing him. But when he looked at Zareth, he saw not just his alien wife, but a woman who represented hope for both their peoples. "We can't keep running," Jake said to the assembled military leaders, "and we can't keep letting him attack innocent people. There's only one way to stop this." Admiral Carter nodded grimly. "You're talking about taking the fight to him." "Exactly," Jake replied. "Zareth H. says there are still people in the Kepler system who oppose Vex. If we can get there and rally them to our cause, we might be able to stop him before he destroys more colonies." Commander Brooks, who had become an ally over the past weeks, leaned forward. "Mr. Martinez, you're talking about launching an invasion of an alien star system with technology we barely understand. The odds of success are minimal." Jake looked around the room at all the worried faces. "Maybe so, but doing nothing guarantees that Vexstar wins. At least this way, we're fighting back." General Hayes spoke up. "What kind of force are we talking about?" "Small and fast," Jake replied, an idea forming in his mind. "A few ships, with people who know how to fight smart, instead of just fighting hard. Humans are good at improvising and adapting. Maybe that's enough to make the difference." Zeroth smiled at him with obvious pride. "You continue to surprise me, my husband." "Very well. If Earth is willing to take this risk, I will guide you to my home system, but know that once we begin this path, there is no turning back." The journey to the Kepler system took 3 weeks, using the Stellar Dawn's faster-than-light drive. Jake spent most of that time learning everything he could about Kepler culture, military tactics, and political structure from Zareth. The small Earth Defense Force fleet that accompanied them consisted of only 5 ships, but each one carried humanity's best soldiers and most advanced weapons. Commander Brooks had insisted on leading the military side of the mission personally. She and Jake had developed a mutual respect during the planning stages, despite their very different backgrounds. Pete had also insisted on coming along, claiming that Jake would need someone to watch his back who wasn't caught up in all the political complications. "I still can't believe I'm flying through space to fight aliens," Pete said as he looked out at the stars streaming past their viewports. "6 months ago, the most exciting thing in my life was changing transmission fluid." Jake laughed, but he understood what Pete meant. The transformation from small-town mechanic to interstellar diplomat had been overwhelming, yet somehow, it all felt right. Maybe he had been meant for something bigger than fixing cars in Phoenix. When they finally arrived in the Kepler system, Jake was amazed by what he saw. The system had 7 planets, 3 of which were inhabited by billions of Keplers. Massive cities covered the surfaces of the worlds, connected by gleaming transport tubes that stretched between continents. Space stations the size of Earth's moon orbited each planet, serving as trading posts and military bases. "It's beautiful," Jake whispered as he stared at the main Kepler homeworld through the ship's viewing screen. "It was," Zareth replied sadly. "But Vexstar's rule has brought fear and oppression to our people. Look at the orbital defenses he has constructed." Jake could see what she meant. The space around each planet bristled with weapon platforms and patrol ships. The once peaceful Kepler system had been turned into an armed fortress. It was clear that many people lived in fear of their own government. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Within hours, they were contacted by several faction leaders who had been secretly opposing Vexstar's rule. The meetings took place on a hidden asteroid base that served as headquarters for the resistance movement. Commander Llewellyn, whom Jake had met during the Earth negotiations, greeted them personally. "Princess Zareth, your return brings hope to our people. But I must warn you, Vexstar has consolidated more power than we expected. He controls the military and has executed many who opposed him." Jake listened as the Kepler resistance leaders described the situation. Vexstar had declared himself emperor for life and abolished the old council system that had provided checks on royal power. Anyone who questioned his authority was arrested or simply disappeared. The people were afraid to speak out against him. "What we need is a way to show the people that Vexstar can be defeated," Zareth said. "If they see that he is not as powerful as he claims, they might find the courage to stand up to him." That was when Jake had an idea that shocked everyone in the room. What if we challenged the whole system? Instead of just replacing one ruler with another, what if we let the people choose their own government? The Kepler resistance leaders looked at him like he had suggested something obscene. "Choose their own government," Commander Thalen repeated. "But who would make the important decisions? How would anything get done? The same way it gets done on Earth," Jake explained. "People elect representatives to speak for them. Those representatives make laws and policies based on what the people want, not what some king or emperor decides." Zareth H. was studying Jake with fascination. "You are suggesting that we establish a democracy in the Kepler system. Why not?" Jake asked. "Your people are smart and educated. They can make their own decisions about how they want to be governed, and if they don't like their leaders, they can choose new ones." The idea caused heated debate among the resistance leaders. Some thought it was brilliant, while others considered it dangerous chaos. But Jake noticed that the younger Keplers were more interested in the concept than the older ones. "It would certainly be different from anything Vexstar expects," one young commander said. "He is prepared for a traditional succession war, not a political revolution." Word of Jake's democratic proposal spread quickly through the resistance network. To everyone's surprise, it gained support rapidly among ordinary Keplers, who were tired of being ruled by whoever was strong enough to seize power. The idea that they could actually have a say in their own government was revolutionary. Vex's response was swift and brutal. He announced that any Kepler caught discussing seditious ideas would be executed immediately. He also issued a personal challenge to Jake, demanding single combat to settle the dispute once and for all. By ancient law, the mate of a royal claimant may fight in her place, Vexstar's message declared. "If this human male defeats me in combat, I will acknowledge Zareth's claim to rule. If I defeat him, she will surrender herself to my justice." Jake stared at the holographic image of his brother-in-law, a being who stood 7 feet tall and possessed the strength to crush steel with his bare hands. The challenge was obviously meant to intimidate him into backing down. "You don't have to accept," Zareth said quietly. There are other ways to fight this war. Jake thought about all the people on both sides who would die if the conflict continued. He thought about the Kepler civilians living in fear, and the human colonies that Vexstar would destroy if he wasn't stopped. Most of all, he thought about the future that he and Zareth could build together if they succeeded. I accept, he announced to the assembled resistance leaders. The combat would take place in the Great Arena on the Kepler homeworld, broadcast live to every planet in the system. It was a tradition that went back thousands of years, a way of settling disputes without massive bloodshed. Jake had 1 week to prepare. Commander Brooks was not happy with his decision. Jake, you're talking about fighting a 7-foot-tall alien warrior who can bench press a truck. This isn't like fixing an engine. I know what I'm up against, Jake replied. But I also know something Vexstar doesn't. What's that? Jake smiled grimly. Humans don't fight fair when the stakes are high enough. During the week of preparation, Jake studied everything he could about Kepler physiology and combat techniques. He learned that despite their superior strength and speed, Keplers had certain weaknesses. They were used to fighting opponents who followed the same rules and traditions they did. They expected honor and formality in combat. Jake had no intention of being honorable or formal. He planned to win. The day of the combat arrived with great fanfare. The arena was packed with 100,000 Keplers, while billions more watched on screens throughout the system. Jake walked onto the arena floor wearing simple human clothing and carrying only basic weapons, while Vexstar appeared in elaborate armor with energy weapons that could cut through solid metal. You have made a grave mistake, human, Vexstar sneered, as they faced each other in the center of the arena. I will make your death quick, as a mercy to my sister. Jake looked up at the towering alien warrior and replied calmly, We'll see about that. The combat began with Vexstar charging across the arena floor like a freight train, his energy sword crackling with deadly power. Jake dove to the side at the last second, letting the alien emperor crash into the arena wall behind him. The crowd gasped as Jake rolled away and came up running, staying just out of reach of Vexstar's powerful swings. Stand still and fight like a warrior, Vexstar roared, frustrated by Jake's evasive tactics. I am fighting like a warrior, Jake called back, dodging another crushing blow. A human warrior. For the next several minutes, Jake led Vexstar on a chase around the arena, using every obstacle and feature of the fighting ground to his advantage. He had studied the layout carefully and knew exactly where every pillar, platform, and barrier was located. Vexstar, confident in his superior strength, had not bothered with such details. The Kepler audience began to murmur with confusion. They were used to combat that was direct and brutal, where the strongest fighter won quickly. Jake's hit-and-run tactics were completely foreign to them, but they were effective. Vexstar was growing tired and angry, making increasingly reckless attacks. Jake had brought several items into the arena that looked like harmless human tools, but could be used as weapons with the right knowledge. A simple wrench became a throwing weapon that struck Vexstar in the head, stunning him briefly. A can of lubricating oil made the arena floor slippery, causing the alien emperor to lose his footing at a crucial moment. You fight without honor, Vexstar snarled as he struggled to regain his balance. I fight to win, Jake replied, landing a solid punch to Vexstar's throat that left him gasping. The turning point came when Jake managed to trick Vexstar into destroying one of the arena's support pillars with his energy sword. The falling debris created a cloud of dust that obscured visibility, allowing Jake to launch a surprise attack from behind. He wrapped a length of cable around Vexstar's neck and held on as the alien thrashed wildly, trying to shake him off. Yield, Jake demanded, tightening his grip. It's over. For a moment, it looked like Vexstar might surrender. He dropped his weapons and raised his hands in apparent defeat. The crowd held its breath as Jake cautiously released the cable and stepped back. But as soon as he was clear, Vexter spun around with a concealed energy dagger, aiming for Jake's heart. The blade never reached its target. Zareth's voice rang out across the arena as she projected herself between Jake and her brother. "Enough," she commanded, her holographic form blocking Vextar's attack. "You cannot interfere in single combat," Vextar protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I am not interfering," Zareth replied calmly. "I am simply observing that you have already lost by attempting to kill an opponent who had shown you mercy. You have proven yourself unworthy of leadership to every Kepler watching this broadcast." Jake looked around the arena and saw that she was right. The crowd was no longer cheering for their emperor. Instead, they were staring at him with disgust and disappointment. Vexter had violated the most basic rules of honorable combat, and, in doing so, he had lost the respect of his people. Commander Thalen and her loyal forces entered the arena to arrest Vextar, who offered no resistance. The fight had gone out of him when he realized that his own people had turned against him. As he was led away, he looked back at Jake with something that might have been respect. "You fought cleverly, human," he admitted. "Perhaps my sister chose better than I thought." The aftermath of the combat moved quickly. With Vextar defeated and disgraced, the Kepler resistance leaders expected Zareth to claim the throne and restore the old monarchy. But Jake had other ideas, and surprisingly, so did Zareth. "My people," she announced to the billions of Keplers watching throughout the system, "for too long we have been ruled by whoever was strong enough to seize power. It is time for something new. It is time for you to choose your own leaders." The announcement of democratic elections sent shockwaves through Kepler society. Many older citizens were confused and frightened by the idea, but younger Keplers embraced it enthusiastically. Political parties formed almost overnight, representing different visions for the future of their civilization. Zareth surprised everyone by running for the new position of elected president, rather than simply claiming the throne by right of birth. Her campaign focused on peaceful expansion, scientific advancement, and cooperation with other species. She won the election by a wide margin, but the fact that there had been an election at all was the real victory. Jake found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to the Kepler Republic, as the new government was called. It was a position that required him to travel regularly between Earth and the Kepler system, maintaining the growing relationship between the two civilizations. The benefits of the alliance were enormous for both species. Kepler technology revolutionized human medicine, transportation, and energy production, while human concepts of democracy and individual freedom inspired reforms throughout Kepler space. Trade between the two civilizations flourished, bringing prosperity to both. Pete took over Jake's old auto repair shop, which became the most famous garage in the galaxy when word spread that it was owned by the best friend of the human who had defeated the Kepler Emperor. Pete loved telling the story to his customers, most of whom were now humans and aliens working together on various projects. "You should have seen Jake back then," Pete would say while working on someone's hovering vehicle. Couldn't balance his checkbook, but somehow he ended up married to an alien princess and started a galactic democracy. Goes to show, you never know what life's got planned for you. Jake and Zareth's marriage evolved from a political necessity into a genuine love story that captured the imagination of both species. They maintained residences on both Earth and the Kepler homeworld, spending their time working to strengthen the bonds between their peoples. Their relationship became a symbol of what was possible when different cultures worked together with respect and understanding. Children on both worlds grew up hearing stories about the mechanic who won a spaceship and accidentally married an alien princess, proving that love could indeed bridge the vast distances between stars. The final scene of their story took place aboard the Stellar Dawn, as Jake piloted the ship on one of his regular diplomatic missions. The cargo hold was filled with trade goods, scientific equipment, and passengers from both species who were traveling between the two systems for business or pleasure. Do you ever regret it? Zareth asked, as they approached the jump point that would take them back to Earth. Regret what? Jake replied, making adjustments to their course. All of this. Your quiet life as a mechanic. The simplicity you gave up to be with me. Jake looked at his wife, still amazed after all this time that she was real and that she loved him. Never, he said firmly. That $500 I spent at the auction was the best investment I ever made. Zareth smiled and moved closer to him as the stars stretched into lines around them. I love you too, my husband. As the stellar dawn jumped to hyperspace, carrying its precious cargo of hope and friendship between two worlds, Jake Martinez reflected on how much his life had changed. He had started out looking for some cheap tools and ended up helping to create a new era of peace and cooperation in the galaxy. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was exactly the life he was meant to live.